the contact by putting his sort of his forearm or whatever right across Jalen's face. Well, obviously, once upon a time in the playoffs, that would have been nothing back in the 80s or 90s or whenever you want to do it. But in today's, if you go above the neck, it's just going to be a flagrant foul.
Right.
Okay, so not only does he not even get to the free throw line, because once upon a time, that's just such an automatic call where he's just going to be shooting the free throws. There was a day.
He was Joel Embiid before Joel Embiid from the free throw line.
Was he? Shannon, back in his day at Houston, if he got Jaylen Brown, you saw it, he had a little step. Well, he doesn't have his burst anymore. But back in the day, that would have been the easiest 2 points he would have scored all night because he'll figure out a way to slither up off the glass or he'll shield him with his body. He's going to make that play. Instead, and guess what the score was at that point? Philly is up 8 points at that point. And you know what it was starting to feel like to me? Remember Game 5 of this series? Remember, Philly led by 9 at half. Philly led by 16 after 3 and wound up winning by 12. Well, that was the game where they just stepped on the gas the whole way. And it just looked like, wait a second, Philly just looks like they're the better team, even with a little bit of a hobbled Embiid. But they just look like they got these guys. And it started to feel like that because what had P.J. Tucker done in the first quarter? He'd made all 3 of his threes.
He had 11 points.
What? He'd had 9 total in a game in the playoffs so far. That'd been the most he'd scored. So he's got 12. They got a chance. They're up 8. What if James converts that and makes 2 points out of it? They're up 10. Well, I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but I would like their chances a lot more than what happened because Jaylen Brown then got to go to the other free throw line and shoot 2, and he made 2. And would you believe, I looked this up, in a minute and a half's time from that moment forward, Al Horford makes a 3 that puts Boston up a point. So it could have been Philly by 10 on the James Harden play, and instead, within a minute and a half, I'm not exaggerating, a minute and a half, Horford makes a 3, and all of a sudden Boston's up 1. And then they kind of hang in down the stretch of the second quarter until Jason Tatum makes his sidestep 3 that puts them up 3. And then in the third quarter, they come out, and thanks mostly to Jason Tatum, they blow them off the map. It is 33-10 in the third quarter, and it looked like on defense that they quit on Doc. It just looked like they didn't care anymore. Like, we're done. We did the best we could. Okay, so back to Doc. Can you defend him? Because they did win 54 games this year. That was the most in franchise history since Allen Iverson back in 2001 when they won, I think, 2 more games, maybe just 1 more game. But
they went to the NBA Finals.
They went to the NBA Finals and lost in 5 to the Lakers.
And I was also MVP that year.
He was the MVP, so Joel's the MVP. So you got MVP, 54 wins. And then, for what it's worth, you're at home in a Game 6, and you're up 2 with about, let's call it 6 minutes left. Can Josh Harris defend Doc on that and say, well, at least we got to that moment? At least in a Game 7 at Boston, we almost went up 10. No, okay, to me, because you look at Doc's record, and it's horrendous what has happened.
He's lost 10 Game 7s, right?
10, yeah. He's won, I think it's 4-10. He's lost 10. He has now lost 7 3-2 leads. 7 3-2s? Well, come on. You can't do that.
No.
And that's 12 times he's had a lead in a series of any kind, 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever, 3-2.
Yeah, remember he was 2-1 on Atlanta.
He was. Okay, that's 12 times he's lost a lead in a series. And I told you Friday, I love the guy. I would want to play for him, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe everybody would want to play for him, except maybe James Harden. But the point is, Shannon, he just always says, well, it's a make-or-miss league. He kind of sits back, folds his arms, and says, I can't shoot. Once upon a time, I played. Yeah. He was known as Glenn Rivers, and he was a pretty good player. I mean, he was a starting NBA point guard for the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet now he says, well, don't look at me. I don't know what to do. Well, at least Joe Mazzulla, first-year head coach, at least he said, Game 6, I'm gonna put Robert Williams in the starting lineup. And then Marcus Smart said afterwards, well, he's learning. At least he showed that he'll listen and learn. Okay. What did Doc do strategically yesterday? Nothing. They just did the same old thing. They flip it over. Their offense, it gets impossible to watch if you're rooting for them because you're just like, go, somebody do something. It's slow dribbles by James Harden as if there's no shot clock. and then he lobs it over to Joel, who can't push off, so he just stands there with the ball. And if he does start to dribble, he's like trying to back Al Horford down from the wing.
Right.
Well, Joel, you have to
It'll
force
take too
the
long.
issue. Yeah, the clock, and then Tyrese has to throw up some wild three at the clock.
Right.
I don't even know how they got this far. Like, if you look at the big picture of the series, you say, the Celtics should have swept them. The way the
It should have never went 7.
No,
I agree.
no.
It should never.
Come
Went,
on.
I don't know about sweeping them, but I don't believe it should have went 7 games.
Okay. So James Harden yesterday has 5 turnovers. Could we see them? Because again, it wasn't 7 or 10 or 12 turnovers like he's had before, but these are his 5 yesterday, and they just were crazy. Like, okay, what was that? You head scratch and say, that's the one that we just saw. Obviously, became an offensive foul. And here he is again. I don't know. He just lost the handle. That's Westbrookian.
Yeah.
Lost the handle. These are huge possessions in what was still a reasonable game, and then he just throws it out of bounds. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? If I'm Josh Harris and I watch that game, what am I supposed to think? Am I supposed to hold Doc accountable for that? Should James have been benched in the second half? I tweeted at halftime, I think they have a better chance if Maxey runs the point.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if Josh Harris watched this game carefully. I'm not so sure he's fighting James Harden from going back to Houston, considering the kind of money that he's going to want to stay.
Yeah. Okay, so it's interesting, the Josh Harris situation right now. He just took over a down-in-the-dumps Washington franchise, but you want to talk about a sleeping giant?
Yes.
Whew.
That fan base, they look. Hey.
I know it because I have covered the arch rival Dallas Cowboys. I've been there many, many times. They love them some football in Washington. They love that franchise to its core. It is ready to explode. Josh Harris is a very good owner who will do great things in Washington. But now he has a potential problem in Philadelphia, and I start wondering, well, does he really want the sort of PR stain of I fired my head coach? Would that be a good look or a bad look for the NFL as it goes forward with him in running the Commanders?
Man, I'm trying to run a business, and if, most of these guys, they're not just mom and pops.
Yeah.
So he has other things. And if somebody is not fulfilling their obligation in one business, I'm gonna fire him and put somebody else in there. I don't give a damn how it looks.
Well, he is beloved. Doc is beloved and respected.
Yeah,
around
he's
the
beloved
league.
in Clippers. He's beloved in Boston before.
I know, and you can
he
keep
was
on,
Orlando.
keep on. I got it. Maybe it would be a point in his favor.
Maybe he needs to go somewhere else too, Skip, and let somebody else hear his voice.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just too many times. But in the end, it's a superstar-driven league, and to your point, the 2 superstars, especially yesterday.
Ooh, that was bad.
Even in Game 6.
That was bad.
They were missing.
Skip, you can't have 24 points between your big guns.
You just can't.
24?
Yeah, I don't even know how. Like at halftime, I tweeted, it's a miracle. I tweeted that they're only down 3 at halftime with their 2 superstars playing that way.
That Celtics defense just shut down the 76ers pick and roll, guys. And by the way, Doc Rivers in his post-game press conference said he thinks he has another 2 years of coaching left in him, and he'd like to do it in Philly. Time will tell. All right, Shannon, let's move on to your Lakers. They never trade.